Hey there. It's all right.
I'm cold.
I know. Come with me.
Who are you?
It's all right. I'm here to help.
The rain fell in a steady rhythm, drumming against the black Mercedes as it rolled down the slick city streets. Inside, Adrian Kane, 40 pounds heavier than he had been in his 20s, but still commanding every inch of a room with his presence, stared out the window. His life had been a series of meticulous calculations, investments, and acquisitions, yet somehow it felt hollow. Wealth had bought him everything except the one thing he wanted most, but could never have a child. Doctors had told him years ago, and he had accepted it with a stoicism that impressed even himself. Yet tonight, a hollow ache gnawed at him more fiercely than usual. The car slowed near a flickering streetlight, and he noticed something small curled up in the doorway of a shuttered store. A girl, no more than 7 or 8, her dark hair plastered to her pale, rain-soaked cheeks. Her eyes were wide, glassy with unshed tears. And yet there was a flicker of defiance there, a spark that refused to be extinguished. Adrian's breath caught in a way he hadn't expected. He had never noticed a child before without seeing them as an extension of his ambitions or as a problem to be solved. This was different. He stepped out of the car, the cold rain soaking through his tailored coat, and crouched to meet her gaze. "Hey there," he said gently. "Are you okay?" The girl flinched, pressing herself against the wall, as if he might vanish her from existence with a single wrong move. I'm fine," she whispered. Though her trembling hands betrayed her words, Adrian felt a strange tightening in his chest, an emotion he hadn't encountered since his father's funeral years ago. Compassion, yes, but something sharper, deeper. A recognition of loneliness, of need, of possibility. "Can you walk?" he asked softly. She nodded. He offered his hand, and after a long pause, small and hesitant, she placed hers in his. The warmth of her tiny palm against his rough glove sent an unexpected surge of protectiveness through him as he led her into the car. The world seemed to shift. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red, the rain tapping out a rhythm that matched the pounding of his heart. In that moment, Adrian Kane knew this encounter would change everything. He didn't know how or why, but the truth was undeniable. She belonged in his world now. Whether the world wanted her there or not, Adrian drove through the rain-soaked streets. The little girl sitting silently beside him, she had not yet told him her name. She didn't seem ready, or perhaps she didn't trust that anyone could keep her safe. Adrian respected that. He didn't ask more than necessary. Letting her small hand rest lightly on the center console, her fingers occasionally brushing against his. "Do you have somewhere to go?" he finally asked, careful not to sound like a question that demanded an answer. She shook her head, her dark hair clinging to her cheeks. "No, I live nowhere." Adrian swallowed hard. "Nowhere isn't safe." Her eyes flicked up, sharp and wary. "I can take care of myself." A small, bitter laugh escaped him. "At 7? She shrugged as if it were obvious. Adrian couldn't argue with her logic, even if it was flawed. He thought about his own sterile, meticulously ordered life, and how fragile it all suddenly felt. He realized then that wealth, power, even security, all of it, was meaningless if he couldn't protect someone like her. By the time they reached his penthouse, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving the city sparkling in patches of neon and wet asphalt. Adrian led her inside. The moment they stepped through the door, the warmth of his home enveloped them, but it felt foreign to the girl. She stayed close to the entrance, hugging her small arms around herself, her eyes scanning every corner like she expected danger at every turn. "I won't hurt you," Adrian said softly. "Not ever," she hesitated, then whispered, "You don't know me." "No," he admitted, "but I want to." Her gaze dropped, and Adrian gave her the space she needed. He guided her to the sofa and sat across from her, leaving enough room to respect her boundaries. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the quiet hum of the penthouse and the occasional drip from the rain. Finally, she whispered, I don't have anyone. My mom, she's gone. My dad, I don't know. Adrian felt his chest tighten, a knot forming where he hadn't realized it could. The weight of her loneliness mirrored his own in a strange, haunting way. "You're not alone anymore," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Not as long as I'm here." She glanced up, uncertain, as if she wasn't sure whether to believe him. He smiled gently. "I know it's scary, but I promise you'll be safe here." For the first time since he had stepped out into the rain, he felt a flicker of hope, fragile and trembling, but real. The world outside might be cold and unforgiving, but in this apartment, in this unexpected bond, something warm and impossible had begun. As night fell over the city, Adrian watched the girl slowly relax, her eyelids growing heavy. Trusting enough to curl up on the sofa with a thin blanket he had retrieved, he sat beside her, silent and vigilant, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future where laughter and love filled the spaces his wealth never could. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring questions, challenges, and perhaps resistance from the world outside. But tonight, he simply sat there, feeling the rhythm of her breathing, realizing that life had thrown him a chance to rewrite the rules he had long accepted. Asterisk, asterisk, the next morning. Sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long golden streaks across the polished floor. Adrian had left a note on the kitchen counter with breakfast prepared, a simple meal of eggs, toast, and fruit. When he returned from checking messages, the girl was already seated, her small fingers gripping the edge of the table. "I didn't eat much," she said quietly, barely meeting his eyes. "That's okay," Adrian replied, sliding a plate toward her. "You'll eat when you're ready." She poked at the food, her movements cautious, as though any sudden motion might shatter this fragile new safety net. Adrian watched her, noting how careful she was, how observant. Every small detail mattered to her. He could see that she had learned early that the world was not kind. After breakfast, Adrian considered the next steps. He needed to know who she was, where she came from, and if anyone was searching for her. But more importantly, he needed to figure out how to protect her. "Do you know your parents' full names?" he asked gently, trying not to startle her. She shook her head. "Mom, Dad? I don't remember." Adrian nodded, trying to hide the disappointment. He had expected some answers, a lead, anything that could make this less mysterious. But her silence didn't frighten him. It only strengthened his resolve. He would become her guardian, whether the past was known or not. The first step, he decided, was school. She needed structure, safety, a place where she could be a child again. But getting her enrolled wasn't simple. With no legal documents, no parents, no proof of residence, the bureaucracy seemed insurmountable. Adrian's assistants tried to handle it quietly, but every office they visited demanded papers he could not provide. "Wait here," Adrian told the girl, holding her hand. She hesitated, but followed, trusting him. Hours passed in a blur of phone calls and meetings. The girl wandered quietly through the lobby, her wide eyes absorbing every detail, the opulent furniture, the towering sculptures, the people who moved through the space without noticing her at all. She whispered occasionally, "It's so big. Do you live here alone?" "Yes," he replied, smiling faintly. "But now you live here too." Her eyes flickered with a mix of disbelief and tentative hope. "Really?" "Really," Adrian said firmly. By mid-afternoon, a breakthrough came. One of his assistants found a small orphanage willing to enroll her temporarily under a special guardianship, and a social worker could begin the process of verifying her identity. Adrian sighed with relief, realizing the first battle had been won. But he knew this was only the beginning. That evening, he sat with her in his office, the city lights sparkling behind the glass walls. She leaned against him, her head barely reaching his chest. Do you have a name?" he asked, tracing a finger along her small shoulder. I'm Lily," she whispered. "Lily," he repeated, letting the word roll off his tongue. "It suits you." She smiled faintly, and for the first time, it wasn't a scared or wary smile, it was a real one. Adrian felt a rare warmth, a sense of purpose he hadn't known existed. He vowed silently that no matter what the world threw at them, he would protect Lily. But as the night deepened, a nagging thought crept into his mind. There were people who might challenge his guardianship, question his motives, even attempt to take her away. And while he had the resources, he didn't yet understand the emotional battles that lay ahead, how the world would react to a man of wealth, suddenly appearing as a protector to an abandoned child. Tomorrow, he would begin that fight. Tonight, he simply held Lily close, letting her drift into a peaceful sleep, a rare innocence restored. And in the quiet hum of the penthouse, Adrian Kane understood something he had never before. Wealth could buy many things, but it could not buy love, trust, or the miracle of being needed. The next morning, Adrian woke before dawn, his mind already racing. The city was quiet, the streets slick with the remnants of rain, and in his penthouse, Lily slept soundly, her small chest rising and falling with even breaths. He watched her for a moment, a strange tenderness tugging at him, a mix of awe, protectiveness, and fear. Fear of failing her. By mid-morning, the social worker arrived. She was polite but thorough, asking questions Adrian could answer easily and ones Lily could not. Adrian knelt beside her, whispering reassurances. "Just tell them your name, Lily. That's enough for now." Lily nodded slowly, gripping his hand tightly. "Okay," she murmured. As the paperwork progressed, Adrian realized the enormity of what he had undertaken. The orphanage, the legal guardianship, the eventual schooling. It was not just a test of wealth, but of patience, of strategy, and of his ability to navigate a world that didn't understand why he was suddenly invested in a small, abandoned girl. When the social worker left, Adrian guided Lily to the balcony overlooking the city. The skyline stretched endlessly before them, a dazzling array of lights and possibility. "Do you like it?" he asked softly. "It's big," Lily said, eyes wide. "Too big. I might get lost." "You won't," he said, smiling. "I'll make sure you never get lost again." Her small hand found his, squeezing it tentatively. "Promise?" "Promise," he said, the word heavier than any contract he had ever signed, came more binding than any deal he had ever made. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Adrian arranged a tutor for her, began the legal process for formal guardianship, and kept her life as normal as possible. But the outside world was not idle. Rumors began to circulate, news of a wealthy businessman who had taken in an abandoned child. Social media buzzed with speculation, some praising his generosity, others questioning his motives. Adrian ignored the chatter, focusing on Lily, but he knew it would not remain easy. He could handle financial obstacles, even legal ones. But navigating public perception was another battlefield entirely. One evening, as he prepared dinner, Lily wandered into the kitchen, her small voice hesitant. "Will people talk about me?" "They will," he admitted, chopping vegetables. "But you don't have to worry about that. I'll handle it, always." She watched him quietly, eyes wide, then asked, Will you ever leave me?" Adrian froze, the knife hovering in midair. He looked down at her and felt an unfamiliar ache. "Never," he said firmly, placing the knife aside and kneeling to meet her gaze. "Not as long as I live, Lily. I'm not going anywhere." She smiled faintly, a small spark of trust lighting her eyes. Adrian felt something shift inside him, a mixture of relief and fierce determination. This child had awakened something he hadn't felt in years, and he would not let her down. That night, as she slept, Adrian sat in his study, reviewing documents, making calls, and plotting their next steps. Guardianship would not be simple. Opponents would appear, questions would be asked, and his motives would be scrutinized. But he was ready. For Lily, he would fight everything, and somewhere deep inside, he knew that this fight would not just protect Hurt, would redefine him entirely. Asterisk, asterisk, a week passed, and the whispers in the city grew louder. Headlines appeared online. Billionaire takes in abandoned girl hero, or hiding something. Adrian didn't care for the attention, but he knew the scrutiny would intensify. People loved drama more than truth, and he intended to protect Lily from both. That afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the penthouse, Lily sat at the table, coloring carefully in her sketchbook. Adrian watched from the doorway, marveling at how calm she seemed. How the smallest moments like choosing a color or drawing a line could bring her happiness despite everything she had endured. "Lily," he said gently, stepping closer, "do you want to go somewhere tomorrow? Somewhere fun?" Her eyes lifted, brightening slightly. "Like a park?" Adrian nodded. "Yes, a park." She smiled faintly, the first real smile that had reached her eyes since he had found her. Adrian's chest tightened. He had promised himself he would shield her from pain, and seeing her like this felt like a small victory. The next day, they ventured into the city together. Lily held his hand tightly, staying close as the bustling streets surrounded them. She marveled at the pigeons, the fountains, the laughter of children playing. And for a while, the shadows of her past seemed to vanish. But not everything could be escaped. At the park, a journalist recognized Adrian and immediately began taking pictures. Snapping shots of him with Lily, Adrian quickly shielded her, his hand firm on her back. Walking briskly toward a quieter path. "Who are those people?" Lily asked, worry flickering across her face. "They're just curious," he said softly. "Nothing to worry about. We're safe." Later that evening, Adrian sat with Lily in the living room, the city lights shimmering through the windows. He realized the public's attention was not going to fade. In fact, it would only grow. And with that attention would come judgment, questions, and challenges. He had an idea forming in his mind, a bold, daring move that would ensure her protection and silence any critics. But it was risky, unconventional, and would shock everyone who thought they understood him. The next morning, Adrian summoned his legal team and explained his plan. Lily's guardianship would not just be formalized quietly. It would be cemented publicly, but in a way that left no room for doubt or interference. He would announce his commitment in a way the world couldn't ignore, a promise that was as binding as it was audacious. Lily, unaware of the storm brewing outside, continued her small routines, drawing, reading, learning, but Adrian knew that soon her life would change again. This time, the change would be deliberate, calculated, and irreversible. He watched her curl up on the sofa later that night, her small hands clutching a stuffed animal. He whispered to himself, more firmly than ever, "No one will ever take you from me. I'll fight everything for you, Lily. Everything." And in that moment, Adrian Kane knew the world was about to see a side of him no one had ever imagined, a side that would shock, inspire, and ultimately redefine everything about the life he had built. Asterisk, asterisk, the following morning, Adrian called a press conference. The room buzzed with reporters, cameras, and flashing lights. He had never liked the spotlight, but this moment was necessary. This was not for him, it was for Lily. He stepped to the podium, Lily standing quietly at his side. The crowd murmured, curious and skeptical. Some recognized him as the billionaire who had appeared with a child in public. Others were just eager for scandal. Adrian cleared his throat, his eyes scanning the room. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I'm aware of the speculation surrounding my recent actions. I've been accused of everything from publicity stunts to personal motives. Today I want to make something very clear." Lily's small hand found his, and he squeezed it gently, drawing strength from her presence. "This young girl," he continued, "is Lily. She has no one to protect her, no one to care for her. I have decided publicly and irrevocably to become her guardian. She will live with me under my care for as long as she needs, and I will protect her from anyone who seeks to harm or exploit her." A murmur ran through the room. Cameras clicked faster, and reporters began shouting questions. Adrian held up his hand. "I'm not here to debate. I am here to state a fact. Lily belongs to me. I am her family now." Some faces in the crowd were incredulous, others skeptical. "But Mr. Kane," a journalist called, "isn't this unusual? A wealthy man adopting a child without knowing her past? How can you be sure it's the right thing?" Adrian's gaze softened as he looked at Lily, her eyes wide but trusting. "Sometimes doing the right thing isn't about certainty. It's about commitment. And my commitment to Lily is absolute." Then, with a confidence that left the room stunned, he added, "I am making a promise that will shock some of you, and perhaps even anger others. But it is necessary. I will not only adopt Lily, I will ensure that she has a life filled with love, education, safety, and opportunity. Anyone who challenges this, anyone who doubts it, will find that I will fight for her with everything I have." The room erupted into questions, flashes, and whispers. Some reporters tried to pry, some tried to judge, but Adrian remained calm, composed, unwavering. Lily tugged lightly at his sleeve, and he knelt beside her. "Are you ready for this, Lily?" he asked softly. She nodded, a small, brave smile forming. "Yes," she whispered. Adrian stood tall again, addressing the crowd one last time. "Lily is my daughter now. That is not a decision made lightly. That is not a decision made for show. That is my life's promise, and it will not be broken." The cameras continued to flash. The room buzzed with disbelief and awe. Adrian stepped down from the podium, taking Lily's hand, and together they walked away from the chaos, into a future that neither had imagined, but both would face together, as they reached the quiet of his penthouse. Lily looked up at him. "You really mean it?" "Every word," he said, lifting her into his arms. "I swear it. You're never alone again." And in that moment, Adrian Kane understood something he had never known before: love. Trust and family could be forged not by blood, but by courage, commitment, and a willingness to stand against the world for someone who needed you most. The days after the press conference were a whirlwind. Adrian had expected scrutiny, but the reality was heavier than he imagined. Messages flooded in, some praising him, some questioning his motives, and some outright hostile. Yet through it all, Lily remained his anchor. Her small presence a reminder of why he had made the choice. Each morning, Adrian walked her to her new school. She clung to his hand tightly, as if letting go would mean the world itself would vanish. Teachers whispered in admiration of the unusual pairing, but they treated her kindly, letting her ease into her new routine without pressure. At home, life became a delicate balance of normalcy and protection. Adrian hired a small team to quietly handle any inquiries, but he insisted on maintaining a simple routine for Lily. Breakfasts together, walks in the park, reading stories at night, and quiet moments where she could simply be a child. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Lily leaned against him. "Do you ever get scared?" she asked softly. Adrian considered her question. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but fear doesn't change what you do. It just reminds you that what matters is worth protecting." She nodded slowly, her small hand resting on his arm. "I'm glad you found me," she whispered. A lump rose in his throat. "I'm the lucky one, Lily. You found me too." The weeks turned into months. Lily thrived at school, making friends. And Adrian began to notice the subtle ways she healed, the small smiles that lasted longer, the quiet laughter that slipped out unexpectedly, the way she no longer flinched when someone touched her. She was learning to trust, learning to believe that someone could care for her unconditionally. Despite the public attention, Adrian never wavered. He attended parent-teacher meetings, helped her with homework, and even played her silly games, though he was awkward at first. Slowly, the world began to accept their bond, even if some still whispered doubts. One rainy evening, Adrian found her staring out the window, rain tracing patterns on the glass. "Thinking about before?" he asked gently. She nodded, her small voice trembling. "I was scared all the time. I thought no one would ever care." Adrian crouched beside her, holding her small hands in his. "You'll never have to feel that way again, Lily, I promise." "Not ever." Her eyes glistened, and she hugged him tightly. In that embrace, Adrian felt a profound shift, a sense of completeness he had never known. This tiny human had reshaped his entire existence. Later that night, as Lily slept peacefully in her bed, Adrian sat alone in the study, reflecting on the journey. The city lights twinkled below, a reminder of the world they had braved together. He knew challenges would continue: legal hurdles, societal opinions, perhaps even personal doubts, but he also knew something stronger. The bond between them was unbreakable. He whispered into the quiet room. Almost to himself, no matter what comes, we'll face it together. Always. And somewhere in the soft rhythm of the city and the quiet breaths of a sleeping child, Adrian Kane understood that he had found the one thing wealth could never buy, a family built not by chance, but by choice, courage, and love. Asterisk a few months later. Life had begun to settle into a rhythm. Lily had grown more confident, her laughter filling the penthouse like sunlight. Adrian watched her one evening as she played with a small group of children in the living room. Her tiny feet dancing across the floor, her face alight with joy. Yet, even in this newfound peace, challenges remained. A distant relative from Lily's past had surfaced, questioning Adrian's guardianship, claiming rights to her care. Lawyers debated, evidence was requested, and the media sniffed out every detail. Adrian faced it all with calm determination, unwavering in his promise to protect her. One afternoon, the relative arrived unannounced, a woman sharp-eyed and insistent. "Mr. Kane, I have every right to know where Lily is," she demanded. Adrian's expression was steady, polite, but firm. "Lily is under my care. She is safe, healthy, and happy. Nothing will change that." The woman's eyes flicked to Lily, who was standing close to Adrian, her small hand slipping into his. Lily's trust in him radiated outward, an invisible shield against fear. The relative's voice faltered, and after a tense pause, she left muttering complaints. Adrian knew the legal battle was far from over, but he also knew that Lily's confidence in their bond would withstand it. That night, Adrian tucked Lily into bed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You handled today very well," he said softly. She yawned, her eyes heavy. "I wasn't scared. I knew you'd protect me." "I always will," he whispered. Pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead, the days grew warmer. And Adrian introduced Lily to small joys he had long overlooked, trips to the botanical gardens. Lazy mornings with pancakes and cocoa, and evenings spent reading her favorite stories aloud. She laughed easily now, the weight of her past slowly lifting, replaced with trust, love, and a sense of belonging. One evening, as they watched the city skyline from the balcony, Lily turned to him with a curious smile. "Do you think I'm really your daughter?" Adrian looked down at her, his heart swelling. "Yes, Lily. Not because of anything on paper, not because of biology, but because of love. Because family is built with care, trust, and commitment. And that is exactly what we have." Her small hand found his, squeezing it tightly. "I'm glad I found you. I'm glad I found you," he replied, his voice soft but resolute. "You saved me as much as I saved you." As night fell, Adrian stood silently, watching the city lights twinkle below. He reflected on the journey, the rain-soaked streets, the first fearful meeting, the public scrutiny, and every challenge in between. Every step had led to this moment. A life shared, a bond forged in trust, and unwavering devotion. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future filled with laughter, safety, and love. No contracts, no calculations, no wealth, just family. Lily's steady breathing beside him was a reminder that even in a chaotic world, some things were unshakable. Adrian whispered into the quiet night. "No matter what tomorrow brings, we'll face it together. Always." And in that promise, both he and Lily found a peace that neither had ever known, an unbreakable bond. A love forged in courage, and a family chosen, not given. Months passed, and the city had grown accustomed to Adrian Kane and Lily's unusual but undeniable bond. The media had quieted, though some whispers lingered. Adrian no longer noticed them. His focus was entirely on Lily, the small hand that always found his, the laughter that filled his penthouse, and the trust that radiated from her every gesture. One bright morning, Adrian woke to find Lily already awake. Standing at the window, sunlight spilling over her face, she turned to him with a shy smile. "Good morning, Daddy," she said softly. Adrian's heart tightened. "Good morning, my little star," he replied, pulling her into a warm embrace. Today was special. Adrian had arranged a small celebration, not for the world, not for the press, but for them. They would officially mark the day that Lily became his daughter. A day to honor their journey, their bond, and the family they had chosen together, friends from school. A few trusted neighbors and close assistants joined them in the penthouse. Lily wore a simple dress, her hair tied in neat braids, while Adrian adjusted his tie, a rare smile tugging at his lips. He knelt before her, holding her hands in his. "Lily," he said, his voice steady, "today is a day to celebrate. Not because anyone else says so, but because this is our family. You are my daughter, and nothing will ever change that." Tears filled her eyes. "I love you, Daddy," she whispered. "I love you too, Lily," he replied, voice breaking slightly. "More than I can ever put into words. You made my life complete. You gave me a reason to hope, to care, and to fight for something real." The small gathering erupted in smiles, some quietly wiping away tears, moved by the bond that shone so clearly between them. Lily beamed, and Adrian felt a peace settle over him, deep and unshakable. Later, as they sat on the balcony, watching the sun dip below the skyline, Lily leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you think we'll always be like this?" Adrian looked down at her, his heart full. "Yes, Lily, always. No matter what comes, we have each other. That's what matters. That's family." The city lights flickered to life, but the world outside felt distant, unimportant. Here, in this moment, Adrian understood the truth he had been searching for all his life. Family is not given by blood. Wealth or circumstance, it is chosen, nurtured, and protected with unwavering love. Lily yawned, sleepy and content. Adrian lifted her into his arms, holding her close. "Time to rest, my little star," he whispered, as he carried her to bed. He realized something profound. He had found more than a child to care for. He had found a purpose, a joy, and a love that would endure far beyond any obstacle. The rain-soaked streets where he first found Lily seemed like a lifetime ago, a distant memory that had led him to the greatest fortune of all, family. And in the quiet of the night, with Lily sleeping peacefully beside him, Adrian Kane whispered to himself, "A vow stronger than any contract or law, always, Lily, always." The city buzzed below, oblivious to the life-changing bond in the penthouse above. But Adrian and Lily didn't need the world to understand. They had each other, and that was enough. The screen of their life dimmed to a soft glow. The story of a lonely man and a small, abandoned girl, complete not with wealth or fame, but with love, trust, and a promise that would never be broken. The end.